have the Tau been so close to extinction. Your homeworlds are surrounded. The Swarm, the machines, men. To ensure the survival of the Tau, your fleet was dispatched. The fourth expansion, to claim new rich worlds. Yet the warp swallowed us. Your ship emerged alone, war-ravaged, alien. This was not the paradise promised, but you will conquer it. For the Tau, for the greater good, for your survival.
Hey Spuddies, Potato McWhiskey here, and welcome to Warhammer 40k Gladius, or Gladius Relics of War. This is like a 4X game set in the Warhammer 40k universe, and it's very, very interesting because every unit in the game has a unique ability, has a unique play style, and every faction is very different. Actually, opening up here, I got very unfortunate, and one of my units just gets jacked by one of the enslavers, and that's really, really bad to get one of your first units jacked by the enslavers because you only start with 2. That pretty much more than halves my actual power, because units are more powerful if they're working together, right? Because you do more damage to the enemy, which means they have a harder time doing damage back to you. Thankfully, I am playing the Tau, so I can just quickly steal some of the neutral units. I believe you can take over Crute Hounds and the Vestbids, sort of like the greater good. You assimilate them into your faction, although you can't build more of them. Once they die, they're dead. So what I'm doing right now is I'm kind of working on my early game stuff. I'm really in the early game, you're just trying to get a basic infrastructure in your capital. I'm trying to get a barracks up in my capital so that I can start cranking out new infantry units. And I'm also going to start working on getting a little bit of tech, because my goal is to try to rush to, I think it's the tier 3 technology, so that I can start getting builders, because the Tau actually have a really interesting builder unit in that it can heal your units every turn. And Tau units actually have really low health. So if you can get a heal off every turn, you're actually restoring a huge percentage of the HP of your army. I mean, like if you consider, I think one of these basic infantry units only has like on the order of like 10 HP to start with, or something like 8. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's really not a lot. Yeah, like if you look at those gun drones, it's only 8 HP for the gun drones and 10 HP for those infantry. And the other really cool thing is that your units can level up, right? If you kill enough stuff, everything within 3 tiles of the thing that dies gets a little bit of experience, as long as your team or your faction was the one that killed them. So right now what I'm doing is I'm just trying to push out a little bit more. You can see that kind of relic thing in the bottom left there. It has like, looks like 2... pyramids kind of spinning on top of each other. That's a relic. It's kind of what the game is named after, Relics of War. And it's that particular one will give all of my units a damage bonus. But I'm playing very, very carefully, because in the early game especially, the Tau are a very defensive faction. You don't want to be being too hyper aggressive, because the units have very low HP, and their units get much stronger compared to other factions when they get a little bit of technology on their side. You know, you can see those little drones there. Those are drones that all of my units can summon every 10 turns. I can just summon a drone for 3 turns, which acts as a extra damage source and an extra source of just damage soak. It can eat up damage for me. I'm just working on clearing out a Katachan Devil Nest over there. And those kind of bulbous balloon looking things, those are enslavers, and they are real bad news because they can steal your units. That's why I'm trying to get a very good surround on them, to get as many units to shoot at them at the same time, to try and kill them in a single turn. Because if you can wipe them off the board, any units that were taken over, you'll get them back. And there's the units that I had stolen from me very early on in the game. Once you kill the enslavers, you actually get those units back. So there they are on my side, out in the middle of nowhere, and promptly going to get themselves slaughtered. There's a couple of Vestbids over here. Now, I could have waited for the influence. That's the purple resource up there in the top left hand corner. I could have waited for the purple resource to take those Vestbids over, but I felt like I had enough auxiliary sort of neutral faction troops on my side, and they kind of get weak. Like they can't really upgrade them, and they don't have a lot of longevity. They're really, really good in the early game, and that's about it. So if you just saw there, the tech pop-up was the EMP grenade. I, of course, have researched the combat drones, the EMP upgrade, and the flashbang for my Tau fire warriors, which means that I can make enemy units blind, which means they have a much worse chance of actually hitting me. And I also have a weapon that I can start taking on some heavy vehicles if I start to encounter them. So there I'm just picking my technology. I decided to go for the bonding knife ritual. I started noticing that some of my units were having a bit of morale trouble. And morale is like a whole system in this game that we could talk about. But basically, lower morale is bad, and the worse your morale is, the worse it is. So you want to keep that high. So having the bonded knife ritual to be able to recover my morale seems like a pretty good deal. I actually got caught out there. I got caught by the Imperial Guard there, or Astra Militarum. They kind of popped out of the fog of war, took me by surprise, and I tried to retreat, and I accidentally walked into the Overwatch, one of those neutral units, and lost one of my fire warriors, which is a big pain because every unit you lose in the early game really slows down your expansion. Now, it's quite rare for you to run into another player. I am playing on an absolutely massive match with every faction in the game, but it's quite rare for you to run into them that soon. So I had a bit of a suspicion that they were kind of locked on a peninsula with me, and so this is pretty much where I made the decision that I'm going to direct pretty much every single military resource that I have towards killing them. I also just popped out another settler just there. It's that little builder drone just south of my capital. You'll see in a minute. And I unfortunately I took a bit of a gamble to go for that neutral capture area, and there was an enslaver right beside it, and a neutral fortress as well, which is going to pretty much kill or capture my fire warrior. And there they go. Then I also did the same thing up the north, and a couple of ambles came out of the fog of war instead of punching my little Vespid auxiliaries. I was hoping to just capture a couple of those extra neutral ones and then move the rest of my forces down to the south to start dealing with the Astra Militarum. In my capital, I can't remember if I've unlocked Pathfinders. I think I have unlocked Pathfinders at this point, which are extremely good early game units because they do a ridiculous amount of damage. In fact, you're probably going to get plenty of opportunities to see the Pathfinders do some crazy damage. By the way, you should also be hearing, I have the sounds disabled for the actual footage, but you should be hearing the soundtrack for the game in the background, because the soundtrack for this game is actually incredible. I really, really, really enjoy this game, but I didn't want to do like a traditional Let's Play because it's a very different style of game than you guys might be used to. There's not a real whole lot of economic management. It's really much more about just kind of like balancing all your resources. You have food, you have ore, energy, research, and influence. Those are the 5 resources up in the top left there. And I was trying out one of the Pathfinder drones there. It creates like a force field. I don't know if you guys are familiar with StarCraft. It basically creates an impenetrable tile that no one can walk through, which is kind of an interesting idea. I didn't think it was very useful. I prefer just to get combat drones because they do damage, right? Get damage on the board. And then you can see the Pathfinders just hit that infantry unit, the guardsmen, and it obliterated them. The Pathfinders are really, really interesting because they get their own special suite of drones that other units don't have access to. One of them, I believe, is a recon drone that can scout the map, but also has guns. Another one is a drone that can increase the range of your units. And then the third one is that gravity blocker drone that can kind of prevent units from entering into tiles. I pick up another Pathfinder there, and I start researching the 15-8 XV8 Crisis Battle Suit. I read it as if it was Roman numerals there for a second. But yeah, the XV8 Crisis Battle Suits are really damn good. Like, I'm talking, like, Pathfinders are good, don't get me wrong. But the XV8 Battlesuit is absolutely dominant. It may actually be the best infantry unit that the Tau has access to. And that's the thing about the Tau is a lot of their really basic units are actually kind of crap. But once you get a bit of tech, and if you can stay alive, you can get access to these insane units. I'm talking like those Crisis Battlesuits, like they one-shot a lot of these weak infantry units like the Guardsmen. Whereas it's taking multiple shots, coordinated fire, using special abilities from these basic units. So like the Tau units are very, very weak individually, but when they're acting together, they become like an actual army. But if you have a powerful enough unit, you can just pick off a Tau unit every turn, and that becomes a big problem for the Tau player. This is a single player game, by the way. I'm playing against AI, so I'm just like trying the game out. But the other really cool thing about the Tau is a lot of their units are actually floating and flying. You can kind of see on the terrain there's like this purple stuff. It's called wireweed. And if a unit stands in that, it takes damage every turn, depending on, several different factors. Like technically the wireweed actually attacks the unit on it, so it like depends on how much health the unit has, because the combat system in this game is actually really deep and involved. So like, if you imagine, rather than like in Civ 6, for example, you build a unit and then that unit has like a particular set of stats and stuff like that. In this game, you kind of imagine that you're building a squad, and each individual member of that squad has its own stats. And so like, as a unit takes damage, more of those squad members are dying, and then the unit consequently does less damage. If you use a grenade ability, they throw less grenades. So you kind of have to balance having sort of swarming units that are really, really good at absorbing big hits, like non-blast weaponry, and having big units that are good at absorbing like many, many hits of individual weapons. Because the big units are going to take a lot of damage from something like a Melta, which is specifically designed to hit large targets. Whereas infantry, because there's no damage overflow, if you do 10 damage to my infantry, but it's only a single attack, it'll only do 2 damage because it's basically that attack only hit one of my squad members. That's why you want to have weapons like Blast that do multiple damage, to different to multiple targets in a squad. And you also want to get like units that have lots of individual attacks, because those attacks can overflow, because each individual attack can kill one unit and then go on and kill another one. Now, it's been a little bit of time since I looked super deep into the gameplay on that one, but that's sort of more or less how it works. But there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on here. So I feel like I correctly identified that the Astra Militarum were kind of stuck in this corner here. You can see there's their second city. And slightly to the southeast of that, you might get a glimpse of their other city just at the bottom of the screen. So I correctly identified, since they're on really low tech units, and they're also trying to pump out those tech priests. Oh God, I can't remember the name of that unit. But that's basically their settler unit down there in the top, in the bottom right. And so I basically caught them with their pants down trying to settle, and bum rushed them with like early game tech units. And I'm going to try and take them out really, really early, because if I can take them out, that gives me a lot of breathing room to get control of the map on this side of the map. Because remember, I'm up against 6 other players. There's an Astra Militarum, there's Space Marines, there's Chaos Space Marines, there's me as the Tau. That's 4 or 5. Then who is the other one? And then there's the Tyranids and the... Gosh, I can't remember the name of them. The orcs. Oh yeah, the orcs are in this. You'll see the orcs in a little bit. But yeah, this is, I think we're about an hour into me playing now. Because I was a little bit slow in the early game, kind of figuring things out, but now I'm getting like the hang of things, and I'm feeling like I'm pretty dominant over here. Right now I'm taking over the city, so unlike in maybe other 4X games, you don't actually take over a city, you just blow it up and eradicate it, and that's pretty much it. You like just erase that city off the face of the planet, because in Warhammer 40k there is no peaceful option really, although it would be kind of cool if the Tau could assimilate other people's cities. That would be a cool mechanic. However, a lot of those factions in the game probably wouldn't look too kindly upon that, like the Astra Militarum, pretty fanatical. The Chaos Space Marines, not really the kind of people who are going to join up for the greater good. This is me just kind of taking a moment to look at the XV8 Crisis battlesuits, because they are crazy good. I would go as far as to say is like a single XV8 battlesuit is worth maybe 3 of those Fire Warriors. That's just how powerful they are in comparison. It's honestly a bit crazy just how strong they are. They could probably do with a nerf, but just like to give you an idea what they're running around with, they're running around with flamethrowers and rocket pods. So not only do they completely obliterate infantry, they can also do crazy amounts of damage to heavy units like vehicles. So they just end up being incredibly effective. Right, so took a little break there to get some stuff done, but you can see here I'm just surrounding the capital of the Astra Militarum, the Imperial Guard, and we're going to be taking them out and slowly whittling away their capital. Like I said, I got very, very lucky that they actually didn't get a chance to establish themselves or really get a snowball rolling. They kind of got caught in that corner, and I'm taking as much advantage of that as possible. Now, one of the really interesting things about the economic management of this game is that there are these little neutral sectors posted around the map that I've kind of talked about kind of briefly, but if you actually incorporate those into the city, you can get some really cool bonuses. Typically, they're fairly straightforward. It might be like plus 20% energy, or it could be plus 20% influence, but some of them are interesting. That neutral one just there to the right of my battle suits is actually a trading post that you can buy upgrades for your heroes at, because there are heroes in this game. I kind of went for a non-hero build. Sometimes I do a hero build because heroes are really, really powerful and they're really, really tanky. And I'm just now starting to get my very first hero. I'm going for an ethereal class unit. And this is actually where the game crashed for me. I had a little bit of weirdness. Basically, one of my drone units kind of went away the same turn. It was infected by the Psycho Noon. I don't know how to say that. And kind of caused the game to weird out there. You can kind of see my battle suits are standing on top of an enemy unit there, because that unit hasn't fully properly acquired the fact that it's alive and into the game. And you'll probably see that unit fly out from underneath my units just there like that. And that was a bit weird, but look how strong those battle suits are. They one-shot the Psycho Noon. Now, they are kind of weak neutral units, but if I was trying to take that out with Fire Warriors, it would take 3 to 4 Fire Warriors 2 to 3 turns to take out the Psycho Noon. So it's really, I can't stress enough just how powerful those XVR battle suits are. And you can see a Castellan robot pair coming out of the fog of war there, and that kind of gives me a bit of pause, because those are really, really strong units. They do a lot of damage to big units, and they do a lot of damage to small units because they have blast weapons and really, really good armor piercing weapons too. And not only that, but they also illuminate the target, meaning they take even more damage. Now, there's also a quest system in the game. You can see in the top of the screen there's a Vol ruin that has a yellow arrow on top of it. And I'm kind of moving my ethereal over there to try and get that, to jump inside and explore it, because that's part of my quest. You can see the top right-hand corner of the screen. It's telling me that, research ethereal, produce ethereal, visit highlighted tile with ethereal. And that's one part of my quest. So I just start kind of very carefully making my way over there, and I managed to find another enslaver in the fog of war. Big pain in the ass, but what are you going to do? You can see those Castellan robots are making mincemeat of my battle suits. Think of that, right? The battle suit is one of my most powerful units, and they're getting eviscerated by those Castellan robots. But they still do a lot of damage to them, but they take a lot of damage in return. So I'm just starting to summon as many of those combat drones as possible and trying to focus fire down the Castellan robots. So I just unlocked the commander hero as well, and we'll be seeing him in a little bit. Every faction has their own sort of set of heroes, and they all do very different things and give you very different bonuses. I'll be getting my hands on some cadre fire warriors soon, and they are crazy good, because if you get them to level 6, they give +6 loyalty to every city in your empire. And for every point of positive loyalty that your city has, it gets +1 yield for everything. If you have +6 or 1%, sorry, +1%. So if you make 100 food in a city and you have +1 loyalty, you make 101 food. And so getting that extra loyalty just from leveling up those units is really, really, really powerful. However, the downside is every time you recruit a hero, the next hero gets more expensive. So that's something you have to watch out for. Now, we're also working pretty hard, just kind of generally getting map control. I've also got, I actually settled 2 cities really close to my capital. Sometimes I go for a super wide strategy, but this game I went for just a quick settle, 2 cities, and then try to build those up and use those as my base. And then later on, I'll maybe look at picking up some more cities. The other thing that the Tau have going for them that's really, really unique is, for every unique building they have in a city, they get a bonus to loyalty. So that's another way that they just kind of have their own little bit of unique mechanics that other factions just don't really have access to. And it makes, and pretty much every faction plays differently, which is one of the really, really cool things about the game, is because as opposed to a game like, for example, Age of Empires, or and in my opinion, this game has a lot more in common with a real-time strategy game than it does a 4X, because instead of producing a single unit out of a city, what you do is you build a production building, and then that gives you a production line. So if you have a barracks and a vehicle factory, you can produce infantry and vehicles at the same time. And if you build 2 barracks, you build infantry at the rate of 2 barracks. So it's a very interesting and unique way to sort of do the economic management. There isn't a whole lot of economic management in the game, but what is there is really, really interesting. You can see here, I settled that city basically where the Imperial Guard city was, and I'm slowly just sort of spreading out and building that city up to be more useful. We are about 72 turns into the game, and this is typically the time of the game where things start to slow down. You can see there I have an APC, and I just loaded up a ton of infantry into it because I wanted to try that out. I haven't really played around with APCs. They seem pretty interesting that you can get all your units into a single place and then sort of pop them out like a little clown car of death. And you can actually put battle suits into those things. I'm pretty sure one of those APCs filled with battle suits might be the most powerful early game sort of like bomb you can drop on an enemy. Now, I don't have vision of any other factions right now, so I'm just continuing to explore and do things. And right now, I'm also using that builder unit over by that city that I took over from the Astra Militarum. I'm using that builder to sort of clear the terrain so I can reinforce it more easily. There you have it, the orcs just waltzed out of the fog of war. So this has me a little bit sort of not sure what I should do. I'm sending a small army down to the southeast to see if I can gain a little bit of ground, maybe capture a couple of those neutral outposts that give you some resources and some bonuses, while I'm going to be redirecting the vast majority of my forces to go fight the orcs. And I have a sneaking suspicion that the orcs are to my west in terms of their cities, so I have a rather large force that was escorting the Ethereal, who's now on his way down to the other Vol ruin, to kind of go see if I can scout that out. And then I have the rest of my forces pushing up from the southeast on the orcs. But I'm going to take a couple turns here just to line up, be safe, and wait for the real opportunity that I'm looking for to push on the orcs. I am, of course, just kind of throwing the occasional drone at them just to get a bit of scouting information. And we're also exploring down here to the southeast. And we're going to run into another very interesting faction as soon as we clear out this area of the neutral units. So there you go, I have found the orc capital to the west there. Now, the thing about your cities is the bigger their population and the more buildings they've built and all these sorts of different things, is the more powerful the city is on the defense. It has way more health, it's very difficult to take. So that orc city with 13 population is actually going to be a pain in the ass to kill. And I don't think these sort of low-tech units that I have to the north are going to be able to take it like I was for the Astra Militarum. Just because the orcs tend to be a lot more dangerous in the early game than the Astra Militarum. The Astra Militarum are kind of like the Tau in that they need a critical mass of sort of really good tech units to start making really big plays on the map. So I'm going to play it much more carefully when I'm trying to take on the orcs. You can see here I found some more enslavers, and not only that, but the astute among you might have spotted the Necron units that have been enslaved. And something really interesting is going to happen. I'm going to go ahead and kill that enslaver, and then those Necron units are going to flip back to the Necron player. And then there's going to be a very grueling, brutal war down to the south. And I don't have a lot of units to fight that war. So it's very much so going to be me defending and being as careful as possible. Although I do want to try to pick up kills on the Necron units as much as I can. And I'm pretty much going to hold that choke point for as long as I think I can. I do have a builder robot in there that I can use to heal my units, but I'm also going to try to settle a city down there, and we're going to see how that goes for me. So I have all my units together, so I start pushing on the orcs, and I have a sort of direction coming from the north of them as well. I'm going to try and get my forces to converge around the south of that lake and see if we can't put a big push onto the orc capital. Because if I went straight for the orc capital right now with those low-tech units, I would get absolutely shredded. Orcs, a lot of the orc units can actually one-shot some of my low-tier infantry because they have melee weapons and ranged weapons, and a lot of my units are extremely vulnerable to melee weapons. Because if you think about it, what I was talking about earlier, those orc units essentially have 10 attacks, and my units only have 5 sort of individual units, which means they can very easily blow up an entire squad of low health units in a single attack. So I have to be very careful when I'm dealing with the orcs. And I'm actually going to lose a couple of units a little bit carelessly against them. But similarly, my flamethrower battlesuit units obliterate the basic orc infantry because they have those ridiculously powerful flamethrowers And when they shoot their flamethrowers, they also shoot their rockets, which is just like a crazy amount of damage. There's a couple of neutral bastions here that I'm taking on as well as another relic that I'm going to try to take over. And I've got my builders doing the healing. And right now, I'm kind of like thinking about how I want to build up my capital. It's in a really good place for infantry production, but for anything else, I'm kind of relying on my second settled cities to really, pick up the weight or pick up the slack there. And some of the orc units, you'll notice there, I attacked one of the orc hero war bosses with my battle suits, and I did not do a huge amount of damage. I did a decent amount of damage to a hero unit, but nowhere near the kind of damage that they can pull off against a regular infantry. And that just kind of goes to show just how strong heroes are at just absorbing damage and dishing it out. Now, there's a couple of basic orc units here. I believe the Pain Boys. I think the Pain Boys actually might technically be heroes, and they can do some really interesting stuff, like permanently upgrading some of the orc units and stuff like that. And the orcs are actually such a cool faction to play because orc units take influence to maintain, but every time an orc unit attacks or fights, the orcs gain influence. So it becomes kind of this thing where your maintenance for your army as the orcs is actually fighting, which is a very, very interesting gameplay style. Whereas for the Tau, it's much more of a like maintain your food and minerals and just enough energy to keep your buildings supplied. So even the economy for the individual factions are very, very different and make you play in very different ways. Like the Tau are very much so a very slow, methodical push in carefully, whereas the orcs are kind of a throw everything we have at them because we can replenish our units very quickly and we actually get resources for fighting. You can see down there I'm setting up my defensive line with the Necrons because I'm like, I don't have enough units or enough production to fight a two-front war. So I'm going to try to set up a defensive position against the Necrons and then try to take care of the orcs because I feel like I would get more out of fighting the orcs. The Necron are a nightmare for the Tau to fight because Necron units heal every turn. So if I'm not getting full kills, they'll just retreat and heal up and come back and fight me again. Not only that, but late game Necron tech, they can like instantly heal their units and like create new units and they spawn new units. It's just a terrifying race to go up against. I don't know if you're seeing this, but every time I kill an orc unit, it's creating orcoid fungus on the ground. And that's a big problem for you if you're fighting against the orcs. Because if they manage to push me back through that fungus, they'll actually start getting combat bonuses for fighting in the fungus. And needless to say, it's not a fun time to be fighting an orc in the fungus. But I'm actually got a little bit lucky here. Some of their units are standing in the wireweed that does damage to them. So it's making my life a little bit easier to actually kill them off. And I do manage to take out that war boss right there. But again, when he dies, he creates more fungus. So there's no penalties for you standing on the fungus, but I think some late game orc techs let them summon units onto the fungus. So the orcs, you really gotta deal with the orcs when you meet them because their units just become ridiculous when the map is just covered in fungus. There's units popping up behind your armies. There's all sorts of nutty stuff going on when you're fighting the orcs. So you just have to be ready for that. And still just slowly building up the economy in my capital. My army is so huge right now that I'm actually losing food and I'm not making nearly enough ore or minerals to be able to actually sustain my construction. A lot of my city production buildings are idle right now just because my economy just isn't strong enough to actually hold. And you'll see there was like a special effect on the Rocklaw city. Basically, I think it's kind of funny that it's called Rocklaw. Kind of makes me think of Wrocław, which is like a Polish city. Has a kind of similar name. But yeah, I just cast a spell, which is one of the Tau unique spells, which essentially lets me hurt the loyalty of an enemy city by spending influence. So I essentially just kind of stole some of their yields away from them. I also just unlocked Seeker Missiles, which is like a special ability for vehicles. And it'll give them another way to do damage. Every 5 turns, they can fire a missile. And some of your units have the ability to sort of paint a target that'll make the missiles do more damage. So it's very, very interesting how the Tau units all kind of interact with each other and work together. Like you could have one unit, instead of attacking, he'll paint a target on one of the enemy units, and then all of your units will do more damage, or maybe the next attack will do more damage. It's sort of very, very interesting how they all interact together. And a lot of the Tau units kind of buff each other as well. Like I believe the battle suits, or it might just be some of the higher tech battle suits, actually get bonus damage and give buffs to vehicles if they're near them, sort of as like a support thing. So there's a lot of really interesting things going on there. And I actually just stuffed one of my Crute Hounds into one of my APCs because my Crute Hound was about to die. And something really interesting that I didn't know about APCs, units inside APCs heal every turn, even if the APC acts. So it's a really useful way to sort of compress your army into a smaller footprint, and also provide a way to keep those infantry safe. Now, I haven't actually had an APC blow up with units inside it, but I imagine that might be pretty bad for you. But you can see here, I'm pushing up on one of the orc cities. I actually already took out their third settlement, and I'm working on taking out the second one, and the Necrons are just coming for me. But thankfully, those battle suits are just so crazy strong against infantry that at least until the Necrons start pulling up things like Destroyers and Devastators, or whatever they're called, and some of their more high-tech hero units, I'm going to be able to hold them off here for a very, very long time, considering how little forces I have down there, which is just perfect because it's given me plenty of time to deal with the orcs. Even so, I'm still getting pretty close to losing units, and I'm having to make liberal use of drones to tank for me. Now, I decided to push forward here very, very slightly so that I could use both the shielding drone and the healing drone, sort of backing up my battle suits to keep them safe and healthy. And it seems to be working out pretty well for me. Unfortunately, one of my units there just got absolutely obliterated by the Castellan robot and the Fortress of Redemption. I think it's... No, that's the Space Marine thing. But you can see just there, I actually started clearing out some of the wireweed with those builder units so that I could kind of cut through and get to the Orc City more easily. Otherwise, I would have had to go through essentially a one-tile wide gap if I didn't want to take damage on the approach. And that's why I really, really like bringing those builder drones with me, because not only can they heal, they can also clear out some really unfavorable terrain problems once you've started to push the enemy back. And that's why I think this game might actually be one of the best, what do you call them? One of the best sort of strategy war games I've actually played in a very long time. Everything just kind of works together in a very intricate way. It's very, very fun to kind of carefully plot a kill on an enemy unit so they can't escape. It's very fun to unlock upgrades for your units, because you don't just get the base unit in this game. You can unlock upgrades. For example, I think I already unlocked the upgrade that gives all my infantry +1 armor, which means any armor penetrating attacks are going to do slightly less damage, and any attacks that don't have any armor penetration are going to do significantly less damage, because armor scales in a very interesting way in this game. The more armor you have, the better. So like having 2 armor, not that big of a deal. Having 4, like I think 2 armor is 16% damage resistance, but having 4 armor is like 30%. Like it's more than double the value of the previous 2 points. So you want to get high armor units out if you can, because that forces the enemy to look for armor penetration units. I'm kind of like debating on how I'm going to be taking on these Necrons. The most important thing with the Necrons is if you're not getting kills on their units, you're losing, because they just step back. A couple of turns later, they're full health, and they step back into the fray. Meanwhile, your units don't heal nearly as fast. So the Necrons are really scary to fight. I think I talked about that already. It's just absolutely terrifying. And right now, what I'm trying to do is position my Cadre Fire Warriors, are they called Cadre Fire Warriors? I think or maybe they're Cadre Fireblades. They're basically snipers, right? It's kind of essentially what they are. They're snipers who provide buffs to your units. I'm trying to make sure that they're in range for when I'm getting kills on things, so they get experience, because heroes actually get spells as they level up. They have they can pick from 4 different spells. They have 3 basic spells and 1 ultimate spell. The ultimate spell of the Cadre Fireblade is that loyalty buff I was talking about earlier. So I'm trying to get those guys leveled up, because the one thing you'll know is every time you settle a city, every city in your empire takes a -6 loyalty debuff, which is like a 6% loss of all yields in the city. So if I can get those Cadre Fireblades upgraded to level 6, they'll get their loyalty buff, and will essentially cancel out the penalty of one of my settlements on all my other settlements, which is really, really powerful. I don't think I really need to explain why that is so powerful. Being able to essentially, erase 1 tick of your empire expansion penalty just by leveling a unit up really kind of helps maintain your economy. And I actually have one of them to level 6 right now. And I'm going to be working on getting the other one to level 6. And you'll see all my yields. Once I have those guys leveled up, my economy becomes so much better. Because each point of negative loyalty is way worse than the previous point. Whereas on the inverse of that, each point of positive loyalty is less valuable of the previous one. Because if you go from 100, like if you go from 0 loyalty to -1 loyalty, you're losing 1% of your yield. But if you're going from -50 loyalty to -49 loyalty, you're losing 2% of your yield. So that's why it's really, really important to keep on top of loyalty. It can spiral out of hand really, really quickly. And it's actually, I think so far, the Tau are my favorite to play, just because they have this really interesting gameplay early game, like where you're extremely weak and you have to rely on these really, really bad neutral units to even just survive. Now, I will admit, here, I think this is where I was starting to regret making the map so big and having so many players on it, because my army has just become so ridiculously huge that it's becoming unwieldy. I just have too many units to manage. And I just ran into the Space Marines, and they're going to be a huge problem for me, because the Space Marine units are like individually the most powerful units in the game as far as I'm aware, because the Space Marine have a very particular penalty. Space Marines can only build one city. They can only have one city on the entire map. However, Space Marines can place down special outposts next to those neutral ruins and stuff like that scattered around the map, and get the full benefit of that as if it was integrated into the city. So that single city that they have can start to have ridiculous yields. Like, I'm talking like outrageous amounts of output in terms of energy, in terms of science, in terms of ore, everything. Now, they don't get as much production as other factions, but even so, it's still really scary to be up against the Space Marines, especially when they've got the map carpeted in those Fortresses of Redemption, because they can just pump out really high-tech units from a single city. Now, the downside is they only get a single city, whereas I'm able to specialize and produce from multiple different cities. But the interesting thing about the Tau, I already talked about this a little bit, but they actually get a benefit for not specializing their cities, because they have the special unity buff. That means the more diverse the buildings in their cities, the more loyalty they get. So you're kind of encouraged not to specialize as you would with maybe, say, for example, the Astra Militarum. You might build a city entirely just to fuel the ore and food requirements of your other cities. As you can see here, just a ridiculous, and I mean a ridiculous amount of Space Marines appeared out of the fog of war and are going to start murdering my units. And so now I'm scrambling, because I'm in the middle of taking out the Orc capital, and I need all those units. Look how much health that thing still has left. It has a ridiculous amount of health. And I also managed to get a unit to level 10 there, which was actually an achievement in the game. But that thing has a ridiculous amount of health, and it'll take me another turn or two to really finish that off. So I'm just a little bit worried about my current status in the game, with the Space Marines kind of waltzing out of the fog of war there. But I feel like they managed to come at just kind of like a bad time, but not the worst time. Had they appeared like 4 or 5 turns earlier, I would have been in really bad shape. But the fact that I've basically already dealt with the Orcs is fine. I am going to lose a ton of units here. I lost one of my Pathfinders, which really sucks. Pathfinders are really powerful. But they are kind of like my low-tech units. I'm losing low-tech units, which I care a little bit less about. I'm really worried when I start losing vehicles and my battle suits. And believe me, I'm going to start losing those battle suits as the game goes on, because the higher tech units start coming out. There's going to be a point in this game where the other kind of Space Marines, the Chaos ones, will appear out of the fog of war with gigantic flying dragons and will just murk like half my army to the south. And it's going to be real unpleasant. But, I'm kind of thinking now, I've got myself established, I've got myself into a position, I've killed 2 of my neighbors. It might be time to start considering an expansion or 2 to really start building up my power level. And I'm thinking of settling down where the Orcs were, mainly just as a place to produce infantry to reinforce my front line against the Space Marines, because the Space Marines, they're very, very scary. Now, I am playing the game on hard difficulty, which is probably slightly harder than the base game. Not too difficult for me, because I'm pretty familiar with these kind of games, but still, quite a challenge, I would definitely say. So I start backing up to deal with the Space Marines. They are a big problem, but I am going to start pushing them very, very soon. I'm also starting to use my Ethereal. He's off back from his quest, so he'll start to actually be useful on the front line. He has a very useful ability that I didn't realize. One of them is that he can heal all units around him and himself. So he's really, really good at sustaining your army. He can also provide a damage resistance buff to everyone around him. And if you get him to level 6, his unique special ability is that he lets every unit that is adjacent to him to act twice. That is crazy powerful. Being able to act twice in a single turn with up to 7 units is crazy. I don't think I really need to explain why that's so ridiculously powerful, but being able to attack twice, being able to use 2 separate different special abilities, you don't get the same movement. You just get to act twice. So you can do 2 attacks, or you can do an attack and a special ability. But it's still really, really, really powerful. And right now, I'm just working on holding the line with the Necrons and beginning my slow and steady pushback with the Astra Militarum. My number one thing that I'm looking to deal with the Astra Militarum is actually their vehicles. And I think I've already taken out one of their vehicles, much to their chagrin. There is I can't tell if that's a chaplain or a captain up on the hill. I think the chaplain is to the north, but I think there's a captain on that cliff there who's kind of not being super useful. I think the AI just doesn't really know how to deal with cliffs all that well. I mean, the game isn't without issue, right? There's a few things about the game that kind of annoy me. There's a couple of bugs, there's a couple of crashes. But generally, I really, really enjoy the aesthetic. I really, really enjoy the gameplay. It's very interesting going around, capturing the map. I think as a template, I would be very interesting in continuing to see more development for this game. And honestly, considering it's a fairly niche indie game in the Warhammer 40k universe, I'm surprised at how many updates this game has gotten. I think when it first launched, I think there was only like 3 or 4 factions, and now we're up to like 7, I believe, which is pretty crazy to see a game like this get this much support post-launch from the developers. So I want to give a shout out to Slytherin Games, and oh god, I've forgotten the name of the game company that makes this game. It's right at the start of the video. I completely forgot the name, but they did a great job. Honestly, this is one of my favorite 4X games that's been released in a long time, because it's normally for me, I like to really focus on games that have a lot of economic stuff going on. I like, building trade routes. I like building up cities. I like building infrastructure. And I'm not too sort of worried about the whole warfare or conflict and stuff like that. But this game is 100% conflict, and it really scratches a kind of itch that I didn't realize needed to be scratched for me. I really needed just a real kind of robust and simple economic game followed up with a really in-depth and interesting tactical combat system. And the game kind of delivered something that I didn't think that I wanted, and I'm very happy that it did, because I've been having a great time playing it, and I think you will too. I definitely would recommend this game for like if you're watching this and the whole idea of having heroes, having units, researching technology, managing your cities and the setting. Everyone I don't think I know a single person who isn't like, yeah, the Warhammer 40k universe is like fantastic. It's a brilliant universe to set games in. So like pretty much everything about this game kind of says, yeah, you should try it out. I mean, I don't think it's that expensive to buy, and I think it goes on sale fairly regularly. But like if you're looking for a kind of indie 4X where the emphasis is 100% on combat and battling and less so on economic management, this is the game for you. I really, really enjoy it, and I'll do more videos like this. I think what I will do is I'll definitely play on smaller maps, maybe like a 4-person map on a higher difficulty. Because on a map this large, things get very unwieldy and it takes a very long time to win. I might even play on a slightly higher speed just so we can get through the early game a little bit quicker. I'll kind of play around with and tweak different things about how we go about doing more videos on this game. But I would definitely like to do more videos on this. But again, I didn't want to do a full Let's Play because the actual turn-to-turn sort of stuff that's going on, I don't think it would actually be very interesting to watch. Some games are really interesting to watch, like Civ 6, because there's a lot of really in-depth sort of interactions between different mechanics. Whereas this is more of a very straightforward tactical combat game where there's not a whole lot of deep systems that a viewer can really engage in and learn from. It's really more of a game that you have to play, I feel like. Like, I don't think I could really watch someone play this game because, you know, I would say maybe 30 to 40% of the game is kind of watching your units just beat each other to death, which is really, really fun to do, but probably not that interesting to watch. And here you can see I actually finally settled my city down there on the Necron front. I was hoping to use the city as like a bastion against the Necrons. It didn't go well. All my units have been obliterated by those destroyers. Those destroyers appeared out of the fog of war as I was sort of getting ready to settle that city. And now things are going really bad for me down on the Necron front. I'm actually going to be pushed back pretty far, and I'm going to have to launch a sort of reinforcement wave. However, I do have the resources to send that reinforcement wave because I've more or less pushed back the Space Marines over here on the western side of the map, and the fact that I've killed two of my like sort of closest enemies is going quite well for me. However, there still are a couple of factions in the Fog of War who are going to bring some surprises before we actually finish this game. Now, the Necrons are really terrifying to me right here. I'm still trying to hold out and buy as much time as possible, seeing if I can pick up kills, but I just don't have the firepower down here to pick up kills on the units that he has. So realistically, I'm just buying time. I'm in full retreat. Both of my battle suits are on like a single squad member, really low health. It's not going well for me down there, and I need to get out. However, my economy behind all this is starting to look really healthy. I have a huge army. I have a really, really good amount of income. I have a ton of influence that I can just, you know, pump into other things, start settling more cities. And I think I did actually settle another city over there by the orc original capital because I thought it was a really good spot to kind of just take control of the northwest quadrant of the map. And I'm also starting to pick up more high-tech stuff, like stealth battle suits. I think I've also unlocked the monstrous battle suit units, which have some pretty interesting abilities. They can summon these like stealth drones that give your units damage resistance. Not a whole lot different from like the shield drones as far as I can tell, but still it's really interesting because I think it's unblockable range damage reduction. There's certain types of damage reduction, like some damage reduction can't be sort of cut through, and like damage reduction is different from armor. So there's like armor, which reduces how much damage you take, and then armor piercing goes through that, and then there's damage reduction. But there's also unbreakable damage reduction because certain units have abilities to kind of ignore damage reduction. It's a pretty complex and in-depth combat system. I want to say it's based on, oh god, which edition? The edition previous to the current edition of Warhammer 40k. I can't remember if we're in like 5th or 6th edition. So it's like 4th or 5th. I can't remember. It's based on whatever edition we're on right now, -1. That's the edition the gameplay is based on, which is really, really cool. Because I think they had to negotiate that. Actually, I can't remember exactly, but I think somebody was telling me they had to negotiate that with Games Workshop because Games Workshop is very protective of its Warhammer IP. They don't want to give, because like so much of their revenue is based on people buying figurines and getting armies. They didn't want people to have a way to sort of virtually play battles. That's why things like Tabletop Simulator, I think, is a bit of a pain in the neck for them, even though it is really, really fun. They don't want to cut into the miniature sales, which is like totally understandable. It's like their entire business. But yeah, I think they weren't, it's either like Games Workshop, not that they weren't allowed, it's like Games Workshop was like, yeah, we generally don't do like things that simulate the latest edition of Warhammer. I can't remember though. It could have, you know, like that could be apocryphal. That could be, you know, total bollocks. Like it could be that was just what I was told and it's completely wrong. It could be that the developers are just like, yeah, let's just do 4th edition or whatever edition it is. I can't remember. God, I might even be thinking of D&D editions. I'm not super up on the tabletop lore and stuff like that, but you can see there in the top left-hand corner of the screen, there's the very first Fortress of Redemption. And that is generating a ridiculous amount of influence for the Space Marines right now. And they're just cranking out units to try and push me back. But thankfully, my units are very highly leveled. And I've got a ton of the relics under my control, which means that my units are very, very powerful, far beyond what they should be. Because you can see, like every time I click on a unit, you'll see a bunch of like green diamonds on the unit panel. That's how many buffs I'm getting advantage from controlling those ruins and relics. I think each ruin with the plus sign gives me 10% more health on my units, and each ruin with the little explosion sign gives me 10% more damage. So I think I'm getting like 30% health, 30% damage, which is just like ridiculous amounts of health and damage. And it's making it way easier to be able to roll over the AI. Which is partially another reason why I might go for a smaller map, because there was just a huge density of those relics in the center of the map. And if a player gets control of them, not only am I a little bit smarter than the AI, but now my units are better. So, you know, it just makes the game a little bit too easy, I think, once you reach this sort of snowball point, which is kind of where I started to get a little bit fed up with the game. I think I went into the game on hard difficulty, like I was saying earlier, and I think that was just a scooch too easy for me at that difficulty. And with the map size and my strategic play, I was able to get control of the middle and kind of take them on. So I think I'm going to bump it up. I do plan to do more videos on this. Oh, and there's the commander unit in the center of the screen right there. He has a special doctrine ability that buffs everything on your team within 3 tiles. I kind of wasted it there by not having everything in range, but he can do things like making your units more accurate. He can give them more damage reduction, and I forget what the other one he can do is. But basically, he is a very powerful late game hero that makes all of your units in the local area really powerful for 3 turns, and he can refresh his doctrine every 3 turns. And I think once he hits level 6, he can actually have multiple doctrines going at once, which is kind of nutty, actually. I think he might even be able to have all of them. I never actually got him to level 6 in this game, because if you're watching the YouTube thing, I'm actually going to be finishing this up pretty soon. And there's the Chaos Space Marines, or maybe just the Forces of Chaos, coming out of the fog of war with those flying drakes of terror and murder. And I think they've already killed a couple of my units, so that's where I was like, I'm going to have to retreat on that front line. And right now, I'm starting to feel the crunch of my economy. I'm only on, I think, really 3 producing cities, but realistically it's only like 2 of them that are actually producing units, and so now I'm starting to have a really hard time to control all 3 of the players that I'm currently fighting. So I decided to completely retreat from the Chaos front so that I can focus on the Space Marine front and the Necron front, because I have plenty of room for the Chaos to kind of push into before I really need to fight them, and that'll give me some time to build up my economy and get some more units to take them on. Those battle suits, by the way, like even the Space Marine infantry, because my battle suits are so highly leveled and I have so many of those damage relics, I am shredding their infantry and like completely crippling them. But these Chaos units right here, those flyers, those are way too powerful for me, and I just have to get the hell out of dodge. Those are like extremely late game, like tier 8, tier 9 units. I'm currently on like tier 6 units. So it looks like that Chaos person kind of snowballed a bit and got a bit ahead of me. So I'm going to have to fall back and get the units I need. In particular, I need units that can take out air units. There are a couple of units in the late game tech tree that can deal with that stuff. But, you know, every turn that goes by, I'm getting closer and closer to where those Chaos guys are going to be a big problem for me. So you can see there, just slowly taking out some of the units here. The thing I really like about the Tau, and I talked about this earlier, is that a lot of their units ignore the wire weed, which means I can play around with terrain way more than other people can. Also, I don't know if you saw that there in the center of the screen, but that fortress appeared because I finished a quest, and there's a giant fortress of Chaos forces that just appeared in the center of my empire. And that was another reason why I kind of started to wrap this game up, because I was kind of like, this feels really terrible, because this kind of random event has kind of screwed me by like spawning a massive army in the center of my empire, which I did not think was cool and I did not enjoy, because I was kind of hiding that old Astra Militarum city over there to the east and using it as an economic base. And then a whole bunch of Chaos Havocs strolled out of the fog of war and burnt that city to the ground. And I was feeling a little bit put out by that. So that's why I'm probably going to wrap up this video here. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If there's anything you want me to talk about in the next video, or if you want to ask me questions in the comments, go ahead and do that. I love you all very, very much. Make sure to check out Warhammer 40k Gladius, Relics of War. Bye-bye.